So I'm addressing you as a chartered engineer and a computer scientist. But in fact, most of my work and interests now rest firmly in the field of education rather than computer science. So I hope you'll be interested in what I have to say. I'm going to start with some definitions. So I've got 4 definitions there, and these are my own definitions. And the reason I've put the definitions down as the first slide is because I'm going to be using these terms, and I want it to be clear we're all speaking about the same thing. So I'm going to be using the term academic integrity, and my definition here is taking responsibility for actions relating to study and academic work, to remain honest, ethical, fair, and trustworthy at all times. The second definition is about academic dishonesty, and this is about any member of the academic community, with or without assistance, to gain an unfair academic advantage or benefit. Contract cheating is use of a third party by a student to complete some or all an assignment or exam, which the student then submits. Academic fraud is an action by a member of the academic community, with or without assistance from a third party, with intent to deceive in order to gain an unfair advantage or academic benefit. Now, all of those terms relate to students, but 3 of those terms also relate to academic staff and to other members of the academic community. The only exception there is the contract cheating, which is about student conduct. But in fact, if you look at the green writing at the bottom of the slide, you'll see that ghostwriters or the providers of contract cheating services can be any member of the academic community. So in fact, all 4 of those definitions do by implication, do by the wider definition, refer to all members of the academic community. So I think that's quite important to start by looking at that and realizing that academic integrity is everyone's responsibility. And so you might be wondering why I'm starting with those definitions and why those definitions are important. So I think I'm going to, hopefully by the end of the talk, you will understand why I'm talking about those things. So on this second slide, I have a long list of what I see as the main threats to academic integrity. And I'm basing these threats on lots of research that I've been conducting over the last 10 years. I put plagiarism at the top of the list because I think everyone sees plagiarism as being the most common type of breach of academic integrity or academic misconduct, if you want to use that term. So people see plagiarism still as being one of the problems. But these days, plagiarism is relatively easy to find because we have tools to help us detect it, as long as those tools are used appropriately. The second on the list there is inappropriate sharing and collusion. And I'm going to deal with that in conjunction with the third on the list, which is contract cheating, which is what I've defined on the first slide. Now, not everyone thinks they have a problem with contract cheating, but we do know that the contract cheating commercial industry is enormous. And so we know that people all over the world, particularly students all over the world in higher education, are using contract cheating services. But contract cheating also involves sharing and collusion with other students. It involves ex-students, alumni of universities, helping students, passing work to students. It involves things like sharing websites where students can upload and download work. So it's a big problem, and it's a problem not just because it's a very deliberate thing for students to do, and it affects the integrity of the assessment process. But there are also other implications to do with contract cheating, which I'll talk about as we go through. So the fourth threat here is to do with cheating in examinations. And this has changed with the move to online learning And I know Denise is going to be talking quite a bit about ways that can be addressed. One of the other issues that comes on the next bullet point is impersonation. And this is particularly important in an online world where other people can actually do the work on behalf of the student, and how you actually address that. So that was a problem in face-to-face exams, and it is a particularly big problem in online assessment. The next bullet point is to do with diploma mills. So this is to do with the actual qualifications themselves. So if fake or undeserved academic qualifications are presented, how do you know? How can you find out? And there are ways of doing that these days, particularly using technology. But not everyone checks, and a lot of qualifications as presented are based on trust, and we really all need to be checking those. There are also lots of problems to do with corruption in admissions and in academic appointments. And I've put those two things together because the two problems overlap. So we might think that these problems don't exist in this country, but I can assure you they do. The next one is bribery, harassment, bullying, and undeclared conflicts of interest. I put all of these things together because they tend to be related. These are things that are really difficult to detect and really difficult to deal with if you don't know about them. Leaks of exam questions and results, and these were a particular problem where we actually moved to online learning during the COVID crisis, because institutions tend to have very long times that they allowed for students to complete the work. So it was possible for students to look up answers and share results and share questions during the exams if the checks and balances weren't there. Questionable practices and misconduct in research, and we know that's been going on forever. And there were quite a few examples of that relating to COVID research that have come up. We heard about espionage. We heard about the problem with potentially we were told in the press that some Russian agents were trying to find out results of relating to vaccine trials and so on. Peer review fraud, predatory publishing, salami slicing, and ghost authorship. All of these things are problematic. We rely on peer review to ascertain whether research papers are good and sound and reliable. If there is fraud in the peer review process, then we have to doubt whether all academic papers, regardless of what the journal is, are good. And we see lots and lots of examples of retractions due to people exposing problems with research and with the publication of research. Predatory publishing is something I've been looking into in particular, where very low quality journals are attracting academics to publish in them for financial reasons as a big commercial industry. And how do academics know the difference between a good, reputable publishing company or a journal and a predatory one? Very, very importantly, there can be and there have been lots of examples of fraud in governance and in oversight of institutions, and also relating to academic bodies such as this institution, oversight of those institutions, and particularly in the accreditation process. Do professional bodies necessarily become aware of problems with institutions during the accreditation process? My research shows that it's highly unlikely that happens. So how can that be better managed? And finally, on the list of threats is lack of concern, a lack of awareness of what these threats are. And there are many other threats. This is just a list of what I see as the most prominent ones that have come out of my own research. So there's a link to my own a publication there of mine and my colleagues, and there's a full reference at the end of the talk. So, in terms of the evolving threats, and what we can do about them with the move to online learning. So the sudden move was perhaps not ideally, the assessment may not have been ideally designed to make it suitable to the move to online learning. Plus the fact that many institutions, many course teams may not have had experience with offering online assessment, even within institutions where there was online provision already. The students may have felt insecure, they may have felt unsupported, they may not have had the right kind of study conditions, the right kind of technology. And I'm sure you'll have heard about this in previous talks in this conference. The essay mills, the contract teaching commercial companies, saw an ideal business opportunity relating to all of this combination of circumstances. And a lot of them were contacting students through all sorts of channels, particularly social media, offering them special provisions, special discounts for COVID-19. You wouldn't believe it, but that was happening. Students may not have been well guided about the expectations and the boundaries that academics required of them. They were told that there was no detriment policies in place. They may have been deceived by those kind of messages. That there were mixed messages there to students, that no matter what they did, there wouldn't be any detriment to the outcomes. And of course, that wasn't actually true. The exam completion window provided all these kind of opportunities and the global reach to share, to collude, to download stuff, and to get help with exams from family members, from other students, all the different circumstances. So it was a perfect storm. So we need to prioritise academic integrity. We need to make sure that it is prioritised and is taken seriously. If we don't do that, then it has an impact on academic quality and standards, and that is to nobody's benefit. Not the students, not the institutions, and certainly not to professional bodies. So that will in turn lead to lack of fairness, lack of equality, and lack of consistency. It means that academic qualifications become unreliable and insecure. And one of the consequences of students working with essay mills, working with contract teaching providers, is that they are then open to blackmail. They're open to their own personal information, their personal details being sold off to other companies. And also the same applies to use of diploma mills. And it's not just while the students are enrolled as students in institutions, it's for the rest of their lives. It's a lifelong threat once they've done that. The companies can come back at any time and demand more money, not to expose what the students have done. And we know this happens. We're aware that this has been going on. But of course, it ends up in deficits in professional skills. So very, very serious problems. And I've got a nice example here of, well, not so nice. So impact on quality and standards. So I've taken an example there from the Times of 26th of June, an article written by Charles Bremner. And if I can quote from the article, a third of the pilots of Pakistan International Airways have been grounded for flying with fake or dubious licenses a month after a crew error caused a crash that killed 98 people. So would you want to fly on a plane where the pilot's got someone else to do their exams for them? Of course not. And the same applies to engineering. So what can be done about this problem in the post-COVID world? Well, first of all institutions must have explicit commitment and show leadership to academic integrity. Institutional policies must be reviewed and strengthened to ensure that all the requirements are robust and sound. The institutional services must be adapted to function online if needed. In terms of pedagogy, the normal face-to-face procedures won't necessarily work online in a blended or hybrid approach. and assessments cannot necessarily be adapted, so they need to be looked at to make sure they work well in an online world or a hybrid world. So one of the important things that needs to be done is education for students, and this is what this slide shows. So at all stages during the educational process, students need to be educated about integrity and about the correct behaviour and the right kind of behaviour, particularly if they've made mistakes and they've found to have breached academic integrity. Their conduct needs to be corrected, and so the corrective behaviour is as important as the education throughout their study. Certainly, assessment design and pedagogy is very, very important, because no method of assessment is 100% cheating proof. It's really very, very important that that's understood. You can't design out cheating, but there are ways that you can help, and there are ways that you can make sure it's less likely and it's more difficult for cheating to take place. Active learning, reflective elements, interactive elements, not repeating the same tasks again and again. The students will find the answers, making sure the questions are applied and open-ended, and make sure students are guided what you mean, guided on what you require, and guided on your expectations. There's just a slide here which suggests that you might like to get involved in some activities. The week of the 19th of October, and particularly the Wednesday of that week, is an International Day of Action on Contract Cheating and the European Week of Academic Integrity. There are some links to there. I'm quite happy to be shared. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight to be with you all and share some of my thinking in this area. First of all, a bit of background. I'm the director of the Institute of Educational Technology. This is our wonderful new building. But for those of you who don't know, the Open University has the largest number of open and distance students in Europe, and we have 24,000 students who've declared a disability of some sort, and I suspect in your own universities this number is rising. I want to present today to think about who's driving digital assessment, and these are the variables, if you like, that I want to talk about. But first of all, let's look at the student's point of view and look at how when students draw what they think about assessment. This is one picture. Here is another, and this comes from one of our students' work, looking at feelings. And of course, it's not just the students' feelings about assessment, but really our own, because as teachers we have I suspect most of you have a constructivist learning, you adopt that way of teaching, and our institutions, have to have reliable assessments and accountability, and this can be a tension. But let's look at some pointers and things that are meaningful when teachers drive, assessment and feedback. This is a very, very early AI system built in Lisp by Ali Fowler. And the problem they had at this university, at Kent, was they had too many students where they could get instant feedback or prompt feedback about learning Spanish. And they needed, as probably if you're learning a language and if you keep on going with the same mistakes, they become embedded, the same in any discipline. And so they wanted instant feedback, and they got this. But the thing for us to understand, a lesson to take away, is if you're going to do something like this and you're going to give the students two chances to have a go at the answer with some feedback in between, you must make sure the two submissions are unequally weighted, because otherwise the students won't try on the first attempt. So that's a teacher-driven assessment with feedback. But as you saw at the beginning, assessment's very emotional, and it's sometimes difficult to receive written feedback. It can be on your own journal articles sometimes. So what did we try and do about this, especially as our students, are distant, and this is becoming, they're online, this is becoming maybe the new norm for most of even face-to-face universities. So what we did is we looked at, because we give very intense and detailed feedback to our student assignments, that's our main teaching vehicle, and we wanted to analyse these were comments that are on all these assignments, and there are lots of them. And if you're going to do a category analysis, it's always best to have a category that's already been made. And what was Bale's categories, because he was a psychologist in the 50s. He spent 20 years building this category system. And for me, what was important was it had socio-emotive comments, because, at a distance, you don't want too much negativity when you're giving people feedback, but you certainly want praise. And often tutors forget to praise. So we did this analysis of the comments. And what's important here is, if we start at the bottom of the graph, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, you can see on the bar chart, you can see A and then a pass number. A is for those positive comments the tutor made, referring back to the last slide. And the pass 4 is higher than a pass 1. Let's have a look at the lines. And we can see that for the highest passes, there's more praise for the student. That seems very reasonable. Now let's look at the B comments. Those are larger lines. And those are what I'm calling the teacher comments, the teaching comments. You've got less teaching comments for the higher marks, but more teaching comments for the lower marks, so you're going to help those students who aren't doing so well to do better. That seems all very reasonable. We're very pleased to find this, because we train our tutors how to give feedback. And the C category is really questioning, and we've got less questioning in the lower grade than for the higher grades. That was a big surprise to me, because I thought we would be questioning and pushing our students with the best grades. However, this comes back to the English language. We're very polite. Instead of saying, you should have done this, we sometimes say to our students, have you thought about adding X to the argument, etc. And the D is the negativity, and we have very little negativity, and there's more direct negativity in the lower grades. Now, this system called Open Mental, which we built, we've used for training. It's been used at Southampton and King's College. You can see on the slide that there is a mark given to this essay that's been put in here, this assignment, and we analysed thousands and thousands of scripts, and we've got an algorithm underneath this. And you can see that with the red and the blue bars, there is the ideal number of comments that should be given for the mark for this essay, and the ones that were given. And so this is a good training tool to remind tutors to praise when people are doing well, and to, give feedback to students who are struggling to help them do better. Let's move on to another piece of research that was funded by the EPSRC with myself and Oxford University. This is a project. It was built because our students don't get feedback on their first assignment that they give in when they're working on the assignment, and they might not have been in education for a long time or have very little qualifications. So how could we support them? So we have a system called Open Essayist that summarises your draft. And this came from my research with PASC when I was a doctoral student about conversational theory. And, if I can understand what you told me, I can say it back to you. So Open Essayist will take your draft. It will divide it up into introduction, main text, conclusion. It will also give you all different sorts of feedback. here, this is one particular visualization that was very important, that it gives you the key words, sentences that are in the introduction and conclusion. Why is that important? Well, you know that in an introduction, you're going to tell somebody what you're going to talk about, and then the conclusion should summarize your evidence for what you are going to talk about and give you the inferences that should be made. So if what you're telling people you're going to talk about in the left part there doesn't appear in the conclusion, you've got a problem. And we found when we used this, we trialled this, that the grades improved with students who'd used Open Essayist, and we have significant, statistically significant findings. But like any good research, there was an offshoot to that research. And we started to build what we call rainbow diagrams. So in order to explain those to you, here's a piece of text, and note the text that's in purple and in red. And what we did then was to produce a sentence graph to the text. So here we've got the nodes that are associated with the previous text I showed you and how they're connected. And the introduction is in violet, the red nodes are the conclusions, and the other colours are the evidence that come in between. Now, what happens when you put in 10 identical paragraphs? We get a pattern that looks like this into the system. If we put in 10 identical sentences, we get this sort of global effect. Now, what happens when we put in a Stanford University Booth Prize essay? You can see here that the conclusion, the introduction, the evidence is all closely connected. So this is an excellent piece of work. Let's put in one of our students' essays with a high grade. You see, it's not as good as the previous one, but you can see how the connection is coming together, and there are parts of the essay that are quite spurious. And then from a low grade. And what we did then was to see and mark by eye what these rainbow diagrams were doing. And we found that we could actually mark by eye high, low, and medium from the rainbow diagram. And the research I'm doing at the moment is to actually improve on this part of the program, and so that you can roll over on the nodes and see which part of the essay it's referring to, and also to give interactive feedback to help students improve. So this is a formative tool. And something else you might want to think about, because I'm going to move on to ideas about plagiarism. Thank you, Irene, for your wonderful presentation just now. That maybe we ought to give students more hints about what they're doing before they're writing. And so they understand the task. And they're learning the rules of the game. We did this with and got significant statistics here for that when you actually give students hints. But I think probably what you'd all like to know about is this project, this big European project that I was involved in, the Tesla project, where we built tools, and we built a whole system that contained a number of tools to help deal with, plagiarism, etc. So the technologies were voice, face recognition, keystroke pattern detection. That was very important because we all have our own way of typing. There was anti-plagiarism and forensic analysis. And we also had lawyers involved so that the permission, you have to have a consent form, and that complies with GDPR. So you get onto the system, and you can use teachers can decide what tools they want. But we tested this with 7 different countries. The UK, OU was one of them, and we tested the tools. And you can see we had over 11,000 students, and the teachers made the assignments. we used a different range of subject domains. Engineering and architecture was one of them. And you can see here how we started to, what different types of assessments we employed, formative and summative, supervised and unsupervised, and different types of multiple choice. And there were even, we were doing videos like Vivas, etc., where they couldn't have been done before. And the activities where the assessments were integrated. We've got quizzes, we've got online essay writing, short answers, planning, coursework, designs, discussion groups, etc. But the students, before they were doing just their ordinary work, they had to use the tool. You know, if it was a video tool, you had to put in pictures of yourself, photographs, pictures, live pictures as you were doing it. There were audio files, etc. But the students found they got used to this once they'd registered, and it didn't become a problem for them using the tools. So what were the outcomes? What did the students think about it? I think the most important finding is that students are aware of plagiarism. They're aware of essay mills. They're aware of these things. And they are paying a lot of money to get their degrees. And what they want is for their degree awarding bodies to make sure there is no plagiarism taking place, so that when they take their certificate out into the world, they can get the job, so that their qualification is trusted, and also the university is trusted as well. So just to finish really about software developers and what they're doing. And, you know, we're using forums online. You know, it's very difficult to monitor those and to give feedback. Why don't we use summarization engines? OpenSCS could do this. I've tried this on FutureLearn. So that we can support our students even when there's a lot of chat, a lot of things going on, and where they might feel uncomfortable, especially, first of all, when using these forums. Where are the disruptors? AI for education. I have one of these little robots now, who's rather fine, and I'm using the robot to try and give feedback and to see what the difference that is between, you know, an online system. Does an embedded persona make a difference? And my final slide I want to leave with you. I hope in the future I'll be able to answer, as a robot can, 5 minutes left and 3 million questions. I can just about manage that. And thank you very much for listening.
Okay, we do have a fair few questions for both Irene and Denise. So if I can kick off with Irene. Are you there, Irene?
Yes, I'm here.
So what makes students resort to contract cheating?
Well, there are various reasons that students resort to contract cheating. In some cases, they've been doing it before and not been told it was wrong. And there are some parts of the world where it's just ignored. So that's one reason. Another reason is they probably don't trust the quality of their own work, and they think they can get better work if someone else does it for them. And in most cases, that isn't actually true, and they're not going to learn anything. So those are the most common reasons. And sometimes it's just that the students, particularly international students, think their English isn't good enough. So we need to address those things, and we can do, if we understand the reasons behind it. And sometimes students, there are cases where students get lured in because these companies, they manifest themselves, they masquerade as proofreading companies or as legitimate support services provided by the university, and sometimes students just get sucked into that. and do it accidentally. So if we understand all of these reasons behind it, we can start to address them.
Okay, thanks. A great response. Like you say, if you understand the reasoning, we can get through. Another question has come up. So why have these essay mills been allowed to open and effectively open an illegal business?
Well, in fact, in the UK, it's not illegal. These companies are generally, the UK-based companies are generally registered as formal companies, and it's not illegal for them to set up. In my opinion, it should be, but it isn't at the moment. In some other countries, like Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and some parts of America, there is legislation in place to try to stop companies setting up and to stop the advertising of the services of these companies. But in the UK, so far, we haven't succeeded in getting the government to bring in the necessary legislation. But it's problematic because we don't want to criminalise students. It's the companies that we want to stop. So it's problematic, but there are moves to work with the government on this, and there is some support within the government for trying to introduce legislation. But at the moment, the government's got its mind on other things, so it's problematic.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, one thing that's come from the audience is, I mean, are there any examples of court cases taken by someone that's accused of cheating, and what are the outcomes, and does that exist?
There are some court cases. The QAA and the Advertising Standards Organisation took UK essays to court and won for false advertising. So not to stop them existing as a company, but for actually bringing out false messages to students or for not advising students appropriately. So there have been a few court cases there. The only successful court case I'm aware of where essay mills are illegal is in New Zealand, and they succeeded in shutting down a Chinese company operating in New Zealand. Because that's the other thing; these companies are international, so it's only the UK companies that the law would have any impact on. And a company that is closed down in one country can easily set up in another country where there isn't legislation. So it's like a whack-a-mole, really. You're not going to get rid of them unless there's a kind of international moratorium on making them illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. Question for Denise. Who should be driving the automatic feedback system?
Right, lovely question. I think it should be the teachers, the people who are driving the learning, and with help from the students. For example, what I'm looking at the moment is chatbots. And why am I looking at chatbots? Because if you think about it, students haven't got very much time, and they want to find where information is, especially if they're writing an assignment. And of course, all our teaching materials are online. And if you could talk to the chatbot and say, because we're experimenting with Alexa, can you tell me about natural language? Where can I find everything about natural language processing? The chatbot can bring up and tell you, where you can find those details that can save you time and help you. So that's the sort of thing that I think that this is the area that should be driving, and not that we're finding tools that we don't know what to do with them.
Okay, thank you. Another one for you, Denise. So when you're adding student feedback that addresses the emotive side so as to give more holistic feedback, how do you ensure that a feedback is consistent and doesn't suffer from any bias?
We do that through training, and we also do that from the algorithms that we have underneath. I've also got a free text entry system called Open Comment, which is for history students, because quite frankly, the history department didn't want to use multiple guess questions. And what we've got underneath there is we refer to Carol Dweck's work, and we are instantiating praise for effort as well. And we've also got sentiment analysis engines where we look at student feedback and see how unsettled they are, or how our staff feedback is moving forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Another one for Irene. When it is suspected, how can contract cheating be proved?
Very good question, and a very difficult process, which is why a lot of it goes unresolved. One of the problems is that academics are reluctant to bring forward suspicions because they think it's too difficult, it's going to take a lot of their time up. So there are some new tools from Turnitin. They now have the capacity to check the full profile of a student's work and to do a linguistic analysis of the work of one student, so they can see the differences. They also do quite a sophisticated check of all the metadata, and that often throws things up, like the names of authors being different and different computers being used, and things like editing time being very strange. So this can actually bring forward enough evidence to bring the student in and have a conversation with the student. So that often, if you can ask the student questions in a viva situation that relates to the process of developing the work, and ask them questions about whether they've understood the work, and explain to them what you know about the work, and what it looks like and what the anomalies are that you found, the student will sometimes confess to what they've done, or at least they will admit that they've had some help. So that then opens a conversation, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes the students flatly deny. One of the big problems is that Turnitin doesn't normally find any evidence. It doesn't come up with a high similarity score on commercially produced work, because they actually say they guarantee what they call 100% plagiarism proof, which is very interesting because it's actually all plagiarized, but and so they actually make sure that the work doesn't show a high similarity score. So one of the signals, one of the indicators that you might have contract cheating work is a low similarity score. But of course, these contract cheating companies get wise to it's an arms race. So they get wise to what we know and what we're doing, and they actually try to counter it. So it's a big problem. Certainly, what we're doing in my institution is we are providing re-education for students, even if they've done contract cheating, to try and persuade them not to do it again, and to persuade them, if we can show that, get so far in getting them to at least admit that they've had help. We don't know how that's going to work because it's new policies. So we'll wait and see how that goes on and whether or not it makes any difference. But certainly, just threatening them with expulsion isn't solving the problem. So we need to take new measures. But it's very hard. But if you can provide help for staff in generating evidence, and if you can actually provide help and expertise that's gradually developed, that can make a difference.
So maybe if we turn that around to mitigate this, how can teaching and learning and assessment be designed to actually eliminate, or well, at least minimise contract cheating?
Yeah, so active learning approaches, learning that's kind of engaging the students, where they have to be involved in doing something and then reflecting on what they've done. Those kind of assessments are the least likely to be easily contract cheated, to get someone else to do them for you. But nothing's foolproof. I mean, students do actually give their login details to their ghostwriters. I don't know whether people are aware of that, but they do that. So That's one way you can detect that it's going on, is you can see evidence of illegal accesses to the website, or what are called impossible accesses, where the students access from two different parts of the world at the same time. So students can override these if they're really determined to cheat. And I think the better we get at detecting it and making it known that we can do it, the less likely students are to do it. But at the moment, they are quite likely to get away with it because it's hard to detect.
Indeed.